Welcome to the 7th Live with Tean and Hui Hui. For the first time, this 7th Live will go out on 4 channels: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Wow! Hui Hui has instructed me to tell you that the theme for today's live is Why House So Big?
Hi everyone! We are here today and with us is lawyer Tean, and we are here because the AGC wants us to raise $23,000 on behalf of 5 other Singaporeans. We have managed to raise $8,000 so far and we are still short of $15,000.
Tean, why do you think Hui Hui has instructed me to say that today's theme is Why House So Big?
Well, for the last month, Singapore has been engrossed with 2 black and white houses lived in by Mugam and Vivian Balakrishnan. And what is the amazing thing? The property on which Mugam lives in, 26 Redoubt Road, is nearly 307,000 square feet. Alright, I did a calculation a few weeks ago. I think for a 3-room flat of 70 square feet, you can fit in something like 360 or thereabouts flats if you lay them side by side. I think it has to be one of the largest, if not the largest, property in Singapore, right? And it's amazing Vivian's house is 136,100 square feet. I have been writing about these 2 houses for so long now that I can even tell you exactly how big they are. Alright? Mugam's house is 25.45 times 38 Oxley Road, where Lee Kuan Yew lived. And Vivian's house is 11.23 times the size of 38 Oxley Road. Yeah? So, my friends, here you have a government telling you that they must factor in land costs for BTOs. Yeah? And yet, our ministers are living like Maharajas on Redoubt Road.
Hui Hui, I'm going to ask you a very simple question.
Actually, the way we are explaining the size of the house may not be even easier for the layman to understand, for the common people who stay in HDB like us to understand. So basically, their houses are at least 1,000 times bigger than our HDB BTOs. Basically, their houses, the house that we stay in our HDB BTOs, we need to pay for land costs. We need to have a standard framework whereby we really go for the balloting process, and each balloting process costs $10. A lot of people actually pay a lot of $10 and then they say they give up, they go for a resale flat, and they have all kinds of sales of balance issues, the number of lease of years issue, the SIRS issue because they couldn't get en bloc. And now the government themselves are living in houses that are so big, and they claim that first they claim Singapore got no land for cemetery, they dig up Bukit Brown. Then they say that Singapore got no land for religious purposes, like for temples, for churches, for mosques. And now they are setting religious land costs at market prices. So as of the parliamentary reply is that about 20 to 30 of the religious organizations say that they will wait for the government to change and then they will see how the new framework is going to be. But 6 religious organizations actually gave up on the government and say that they want to renew their lease right now. So these 6 religious organizations, of course, they have the foresight, they are blessed with the wisdom to know that the Singapore government will not give them a better deal, which is why they signed the 30 years lease right on the spot. Whereas the remaining 10, 20, 30 religious organizations, they think that the Singapore government will change. But no, because the Singapore government is not being transparent on how much they are paying per square meter. In fact, the law minister himself declared in parliament that they are only announcing the prices whereby churches are paying as high as $3,000 per square meter. And for Chinese temple, they are paying about $2,000 per square meter. The exact number is actually $1,000 to almost $2,000 within a time period of about 10 years. So the price actually doubled per square meter. And now the law minister said that they are not going to declare how much it costs to build a mosque. Not because he doesn't know, but because there's no transparency, there's no accountability, and all these religious organizations, they are not going to be allocated a land. Why is that so? Because the government said that in 2023, only 4 lands will be allocated in Singapore for religious purposes. 2 of them to Chinese temple and another 2 for churches. So what about the mosques and the Hindu temples and other minority religions?
Lim Tian, I think the 2 of you today, wow, all statistics leh. But Lim Tian, I think Han Hui just quoted a fake statistic. She said that the minister's house is 1,000 times the size of the HDB BTO. Cannot be. At the most 200 times. So Lim Tian, you think she will be Bob Man?
It depends on what kind of BTO you are talking about.
Well, I won't comment on that, except I want to say this. You know, here you have Lawrence Wong, alright? We even had Parliament prorogued and they had a second opening of Parliament, alright? And what was their theme? Their theme was that they were going to fight social stratification. And you know Mugam in 2018, those Singaporeans, you know in Singapore, a person living in a good class bungalow is never more than 15 minutes drive away from a 3-room flat or rented flat. And you know what were his words? His words were, if we don't take fighting inequality seriously, our cohesion will splinter. And here he is, alright, living in possibly Singapore's largest property. Let me remind you, 306,930 square feet. And you think that he should be setting this type of example?
Han Hui, ask you a very simple question. How much is the rental?
And they are not even transparent about the rental, alright? People have been asking for 4 weeks now, 5 weeks, since Kenneth Jeyaretnam came out with this expose on the 6th of May. What is the rental? Alright? And they tell you, oh, we will explain everything in Parliament in July. Why can't you call a press conference, tell Singaporeans all the details? Alright? Why do you need to go to Parliament? Is it because you want parliamentary privilege? Alright? These are things, as Han Hui says, if you are transparent, you should call a press conference immediately and give all the details.
Han Hui, service and conservancy charges SNCC will increase from the 1st of July for PAP town councils. You happy?
Whether the SNCC increase or not, there is nothing to be happy about in the first place. Because in Singapore, our SNCC has a lot of money being stuck in the sinking fund and being stuck in the lift replacement fund. So what are these 2 funds? According to the law, 40% of the money allocated or collected by the SNCC have to be allocated for lift replacement fund. And a lot of money are also millions of dollars per town council is also being stuck inside the sinking fund. And yet they want to continuously raise our SNCC. In fact, back in 2014, that was when one of the first events was being held was to be against the SNCC because the government increased it. And now a 3-room flat is paying about $50 SNCC. So when they increase the SNCC, what percentage of increase is it going to be for the lower income people? The government once said that reputation is temporary, but character is permanent. So their character is permanently trying to make Singaporeans pay and pay. And how can the law minister be trusted? Even his first wife said it is the authoritarian rule of law. 他们自己的屋子可以住到这么大，然后跟你讲说新加坡没有土地，跟你讲说坟墓需要挖上来，人家要拜佛不可以拜佛，人家要拜他基督教、回教，这些全部都不可以拜。昨天还是卫赛节，那新加坡的人呢？他们现在道德去了哪里？新加坡的政府本身有道德没有？ 他讲说，哦，他可以透明化 ，he is honest, there's nothing to hide. If he's honest and there's nothing to hide, why is he hiding the CCTV? Why is he hiding the rental for his house? Why is he waiting such a long time to declare what the numbers will be? Is it because if he marinate the numbers after a few months, it will look better and a better statistic for the country? He said that Singapore shouldn't have inequality, but under the rule, under the law minister rule, our inequality has increased from about 0.2 to 0.3 and it is now above the inequality stage whereby it is above 0.4. Our Gini coefficient is above 0.4. This is a highly unequal society.
You see, SLA can come up with a statement 1 week after Kenneth exposed this whole thing and said, oh, both ministers paid above the guide price. Well, if you are so confident in telling people, nothing was amiss, everything was, kosher, why not tell Singaporeans what was the rental they paid? What was the guide price, which I have been pressing all along? Because for these properties, the guide price will be what the government valuer would have determined. Alright? Let's be open about it. Tell us straight. Alright? Instead of saying, oh, we will tell you in 2 months' time. What sort of feeling does that leave you, my fellow Singaporeans? Yeah? Okay? And these are personal matters, okay? Why pull it to Parliament? Alright? So you are going to have a repeat of 38 Oxley all over again. Every time something controversial comes up, you know what is their first port of call? Their first port of call is Parliament. Alright? Where of course out of 93 seats, they have 83. Yeah? And what is the most amazing thing? Lee Hsien Loong can tell Singaporeans, we are going to have an independent review. An independent review by Teo Chee Hean. Teo Chee Hean is the coordinating minister for national security and home affairs. So he's overlooking what Mugam does, right? Yeah? And you call that independent? My friends, we don't need a so-called review by Teo Chee Hean, okay? We need a commission of inquiry, all right? A commission of inquiry can be convened by Halimah, and I hope she does so, because in her departure speech a few days ago, she told Singaporeans how much she loves this country. Well, she can express that love by convening a COI so that the whole truth in this matter comes out. And I think that will be the best gift she can give Singaporeans in all her 6 years as president.
韩慧慧，我认识你11年，你老了，为什么？
Because in Singapore, we have one of the world's highest cost of living. And not only for cost of living, for our public housing, we pay one of the most amount of money. And yet, the government themselves can live in this kind of houses. 新加坡的政府组屋是世界上的公共政府组屋里面售价最高的。They say that our public housing cost has cost the government a lot of money. That is because they set in land costs when they are trying to sell BTOs, when they are trying to sell HDBs to the Singaporeans. And not only that, they have the cheek to say that they are very transparent. If they are very transparent, if they are very honest, they would have declared how much it is to construct a house, how much it is to pay the worker, and how much did they put in the land cost. Is it a 60% profit that the Singapore government has collected? 新加坡政府讲新加坡的公共组屋很贵，可是为什么贵呢？是材料很贵，是员工很贵，还是因为呢，他们需要把很多钱都放在土地上面？
Okay, everybody talking about how big the house, but there are other more important issues that maybe making life more difficult for Singaporeans. So, Lim Tian, who is the coordinating chairman of the PAP Town Council?
Lim Biao Chuan, the MP for Mountbatten. Alright? And, my friends, we did a walkabout in Mountbatten SNCC last night. Many residents were delighted to see us visiting them on a public holiday. I think we were the only political party that was doing a walkabout on a public holiday. All right? And when we brought up the subject of the SNCC, they were furious. You know, one man told us, I can hardly put enough food on the table for my family. When I go out these days, my $50 doesn't buy me a lot. And he just cannot understand why, in these times, a government can be so cruel, and I will use the word cruel, as to increase the SNCC. Yeah? So, to those people living in Mountbatten and throughout Singapore, I want you to remember, when you elect people like Lim Biao Chuan into parliament, you are just making your life harder and more miserable. And I say the same for Sito Yipin, the MP for Potong Pasir, who was the strongest advocate, I would say. You remember him engaging in this fierce debate in Parliament earlier this year with, I think it was Leon Pereira and James Lim, about why increasing GST was necessary. My friends, I think it is absolutely mad in times of high inflation for a government to increase GST and exacerbating inflationary pressure on essentials such as food, medicine. All right? So the next GE, when you go to the polls, remember MPs like Lim Biao Chuan and Sito Yipin, who make your lives much harder.
Hui Hui, well, I'm very impressed by the two of you today. So many numbers, exact numbers. So I Google and I give you some numbers now, okay? Increase in SNCC from 1st July. So I just look at one town council, I think your favorite town council, Hui, Ang Mo Kio Town Council, okay? Next to where you live, I believe, alright? 2022, accumulated surplus, 12.9 million for residential property, 3.6 million for commercial property, 8.0 million for car park. Sinking fund, 127.9 million for residential property, 54.6 million for commercial property, 27.1 million, 54.6 million for commercial property. Lift replacement fund, 81.8 million for residential property, 13.5 million for commercial property. And this is just for one town council. So, Lim Tian, any estimate all the PAP town council?
I have no idea, but you know, it seems to me like they are trying to create another sovereign wealth fund there. All right? Yeah? And you know, you read those numbers and you tell me, which compassionate, caring government will keep increasing the reserves, all right, in the town council and increase your SNCC at a time when I know, my fellow Singaporeans, many of you are not making ends meet, all right? I can sense in the last few months, basically liquidity has dried up in the economy. I can tell, all right? Just from my clients, the people I work with, you know, Singaporeans these days, frankly, have hardly any monies in their pockets, okay? And I'm not talking about those elite and the privileged who can buy houses anytime they want, travel anytime they want. I'm talking about people living in 3-4-room HDB apartments, okay? And the struggles they are going through. So to me, a move like this, and you know the ridiculous reason they give, is because our cleaners and all that, the progressive wage model, so costs have gone up. So if we want to give more salaries to these people, we must up the SNCC. No, you don't have to. You don't have to at this time. Not when Shi Hian has just read out the numbers. All right? How much you have there? You are telling me that increasing the wages of these cleaners is going to amount to so much? My friends, it is the same logic with this government. All right? They, you know, I do not know what are the estimates. I think Vivian has worked out that the reserves are at least $1.9 trillion. Kenneth Jeranam says that they are in excess of 3 trillion. Yeah? When the government has so much money in its reserves and it still wants to increase ERP, SNCC, it doesn't control COE prices, all right? Our rentals have gone through the roofs, even the expats are fleeing. You tell me, what sort of government you have? And is this the type of government you want your children to have?
Hui Hui, Lim Tian mentioned that the SNCC may have to increase because of the progressive wage model, like cleaners are getting higher pay. So, do you know what is the minimum pay now under the progressive wage model for general cleaners and cleaners, food court cleaners?
So basically, right now, the Singapore government is planning to increase our SNCC. And we take the median, which is a 3-room HDB. If you are a Singaporean staying in a PAP town council, a 3-room HDB is about $50 SNCC now. And if you happen to have a private property on your permanent residence but you are in Singapore, then it's about $70 right now. If the government were to increase about $5 to $10, that is actually a 10 to 20% increase in SNCC. 所以新加坡的杂费，我们平均我们拿3房式来算就好。3房式的杂费现在一间呢，如果你是新加坡人是50块，如果你是外国人或者有私人主屋，一间大概是70块。如果新加坡政府把3房式的杂费起价了差不多5块钱到10块钱，这就是18%到28%的增长。新加坡人才刚刚经过 GST 8%，就是 the GST has just increased 8%，and now they want to increase our SNCC。他们现在又要来起我们的杂费。The government say that our SNCC is increasing because they need more money to pay the cleaners。他们讲说要把这些钱给那些工人，难道给工人的钱有多到这么多吗 ？Are they really going to pay the billions of dollars increase per unit whereby they collected to give to the cleaners? The answer is no. So where is this money going to? This money is going to what the government has kept in called the sinking fund and the lift replacement fund, as well as keeping it to prevent the next political party who wins the PAP war from taking the money. Because all this money in the town council will be confiscated if, let's say, the opposition were to win that particular war.
Hui Hui 你很多答非所问的。Ask you, you don't know, then you go and talk other thing. But never mind. Lim Tian, I give you the numbers now. Progressive wage model, general cleaners, F&B cleaners. Now, the minimum salary is $1,570. Okay. So in real terms,
After your CPF deduction and all that?
no. The 1570 is excluding employer CPF, but including your employee CPF, right? So the real increase for cleaners, laborers, and related workers in the last 21 years is 1.0%. So can you imagine 21 years ago, as a cleaner, your pay was maybe $900, right? The real increase every year, $9 a year.
And you tell me, I mean, the PAP can talk till the cows come home. In real terms, people's lives have declined, right? I mean, you look at the massive inflation of the last couple of years alone. And why I have always said this progressive wage model is a joke, is because in real terms, your wages have not only stagnated, they have gone backwards. All right? You are not keeping up. Look what Australia did 2 days ago. It affects 1/4 of their working population. I think 2.7 million workers. Minimum wage increased by 5.75% or thereabouts. And even then, they are grumbling. Because in Australia, they have this Fair Work Commission that determines every year how much your wages should go up. They don't go and have one every few years like what we do over here, all right? Yeah? Because inflation in Australia today is over 6%. So the workers are grumbling. But at least you can see an effort there to make them keep up, all right, with inflation. I pity our workers, and I pity all those administrative assistants and all that. I say my heart goes out to them. Because whilst our two ministers are living the lives of the Maharajas in Redoubt Road, you know, your lives have gone backwards. Yeah?
Yes, Lieutenant. The Australians have increased their minimum wage 2 days ago to the equivalent of $20.70 Sing dollar. Now in Singapore, of course, you will see that a lot of people are still getting on average like $9 an hour. Han Vivi, I know you've been trying very hard to find a job, right? Because somebody is just you to pay money, right? Okay, and what kind of jobs, have you been looking at, or have you been gone for interview, or tell us.
Okay, so the thing is, because of the AGC asking me to pay money on behalf of 5 others, therefore we actually went to the Ministry of Manpower, and Ministry of Manpower assigned me to SkillsFuture, then assigned me to Workforce Singapore, and then now they are like going through all the careers platform. However, they are not able to get any job. There are new jobs that's coming out. And this is actually a trend that's happening for the past 9 months in Singapore. In fact, Singapore is in a technical recession right now. For the past 9 months, our economy is not growing at all. 所以新加坡呢，过去的9个月里面，根本没有新的工作出来，而且很多新加坡人都被裁员。然后政府还出来讲什么？政府讲说，不要紧，那些还有工作的人，他们的薪水很高。他们的薪水真的很高吗？ There is a difference between the median salary as well as the mean salary. So if you were to compare the 50th percentile in Singapore, the average salary is only just a few $1,000s. Yet the Singapore government say that, Singapore household is getting like as high as $10,000 a month. Really? That is because they included the billionaires who are coming into Singapore. That is also because they included themselves rather than the real Singapore workers, the average Singapore workers. They consider this. A lot of Singaporeans are going jobless. A lot of Singaporeans are being retrenched. And if let's say, like yesterday was Visa Day, you try to help Singaporeans, there are a lot of people out there who are fortunate enough to be in the position to help Singaporeans. For example, 民意法师 used to help Singaporeans who are unemployed. And when the government see that people have followers, have their power to influence others become stronger, the government try to clamp down on them. They try to say that, he's corrupted, try to put it in the news, this is another NKF saga. In fact, it is in the own court judgment, whereby the judge said that this may become like another NKF saga. And the judge doesn't want another NKF saga. The problem is the NKF saga is where the rot is at the top. The corruption is happening at the top, and the government is not doing anything about the NKF saga. And the government is instead going after people who are trying to help the poor, help the unemployed. And this is not only common in this situation right now. There are other corruptions that's happening. Like for example, the Keppel corruption. The Keppel corruption is a government-linked corporation. But is the Singapore government doing anything about it? Is the AGC arresting them? Is the police interrogating them? No, the police is not taking any action against them. Why is that so? Is it because they are related to the PAP government? Is it because they have the support? Is it because the corruption was actually approved by the PAP people? And therefore the AGC dare not charge these 6 people in the court at all. If there is no corruption, why pay fine to the foreign government?
Tean, you mentioned administrative assistance. So I Googled. Under the OPW, which is occupational wages, another initiative similar to progressive wage model, the minimum salary for administrative assistance now is $1,500, which is $70 less than the general F&B cleaner, which is 1,570. And I can't find 21 years ago got something called a minimum salary for administrative assistance, because I think 21 years ago there's no concept of a minimum salary. But anyway, someone told me that 21 years ago the minimum starting salary for administrative assistance was like $1,200. So after you adjust for inflation, 21 years, the administrative assistance, the minimum starting salary compared to today is negative. That means every year
they have been going backwards.
Yeah. Okay, Han Vivi, we have a lot of reserves, like Tean said, he estimates with 1.9 trillion, right? Now, why do you think that other countries, let me rephrase it, do you think other countries lock up the reserves like ours?
所以呢，现在很多新加坡人都没有工作做，很多新加坡人呢都生活在贫困之中。可是新加坡政府却要把我们新加坡人的杂费呀、GST 呀、学校的学费呀、大学学费呀，还有就是各种各样能够起的东西，车费可以起的水电费，他们都起。为什么这样子？他们一直讲因为没有钱，所以他们才需要把这些钱呢，跟人民一起拿，要不然这些公司会倒掉。他讲我们的报纸会倒，他讲我们的公共巴士公司也会倒，难道是真的吗？They say that they are going to privatize our media company, SPH. They say they are going to privatize our public transport company, SBS. Say that if we don't increase the fees, then they are going to collect. Is that really so? And why are they giving money to, let's say, at SPH if nobody is reading them, that they have to inflate their circulation numbers? Is it because that nobody is reading them, so they need to create better propaganda, therefore the government is pumping money into the media industry? Not only that, the Singapore government say that they need to increase our GST, our bus fare, our university loans for the students. Why do they have to have all this kind of debt for them? Because in other countries, universities are free. So why don't they let our graduates just graduate and find a job normally, rather than be signed to bonds, rather than to have a debt on their body the moment they graduate? So in other countries, people actually help the citizens, especially in the period whereby people are struggling right now. And instead of helping the residents, helping the Singaporeans, the Singapore government is trying to increase all these kind of things that increase the cost of living for the average Singaporean. If they already have millions of dollars, billions and trillions of dollars inside there, then why is the government trying to still suck Singaporean dry?
Vivian, you were in the news 2 days ago, right? Everybody is talking about you, right? You have stolen the thunder from the White House, so big saga. What happened 2 days ago?
Let me put this way. I think the formation of People's Alliance is very important. But I hope that we will not take the attention away from Redoubt Road. Okay? Why? Because Redoubt is the most important and significant political news in Singapore in the last 30 years. Why do I say that? It involves a lot of things. First of all is the issue of conflict of interest. You know there is a ministerial code in Singapore, and it says no minister is to enter into any transaction that will give him an advantage, an actual advantage, or apparent advantage, apparent meaning the appearance of an advantage, or any perception of an advantage. Perception and apparent, I think, are similar, all right? Now, you tell me, Mugam and Vivian Balakrishnan are members of the government, right? They are part of the cabinet. You can't find a higher echelon than the cabinet being the representative of the government. You know, when you sign these leases for the black and white, you know who is the landlord? It is not even SLA, you know. It is stated on the leases, the landlord is the government of Singapore. Okay? SLA is only a managing agent for the government in managing these properties. And you know who signs at the end of these leases on behalf of the government? The collector of land revenue. So here we have a situation. Mugam, you are part of government, right? Vivian, you are part of government. So you're renting from yourself. You tell me that does not give a perception of a conflict or an apparent conflict, and you have Mugam going in front of the reporters saying all these claims are outrageous. Well, you explain to Singaporeans then, all right? And if things are so simple, why did you not call an immediate press conference and explain everything? Yeah?
Anyway, I understand there's a lottery going on whoever can guess the actual rent will win the first prize. Now, Hui, in 2014 April, you went to Norway with Roy Nung and one other person to do stories comparing Norway and Singapore, because around that time they always compare Singapore to Norway. So since we are talking about reserves, talking about cost of living, right? What have you got to say about the difference between Norway and Singapore?
In Norway, it's very common to see a lot of families on the street being happy, enjoying themselves. And their working hours is like right after late afternoon, you get to go home, you get to spend time cook with your family. These are basic. And if you have such a big house, why do you need such a big house? To cook with your family? You put both your wives inside there to cook together with both your children? Are your children still even visiting you in the first place? Or is it because your character has some issue? Because character is permanent, and therefore Singapore is under the authoritarian rule of law. And why do you need such a big house when Singaporeans are suffering? Why do you not dare live in Yishun, which is your own GRC? Is it because you know Yishun is unsafe? If Yishun is unsafe, and if Yishun has a lot of people with mental health issues, then is Singapore government putting money into our healthcare system to help benefit the Singaporeans' life, to improve Singaporeans' life? If the government is not putting money to improve Singaporeans' life, then why is the Singapore government using all this money, using all these resources on themselves? Why is the Singapore government enjoying themselves in such a spacious house? Do you need such a spacious house when Singaporeans are squeezing in a small house? 10 people living in a rental flat. And yet you yourself live in such a big bungalow. Not only that, you ask the lower income people who rent from HDB rental flat, to stay in 9 square meter, and you yourself stay in 300 over square feet. Is this
306,000.
306,000
Nearly
square
307,000 square feet of land. Alright?
So how is this even humane? Do you even have any sense of conscience when you do all this?
Now, Lim Tian, you have applied for registration of the People's Alliance Party, which is an alliance of 4 parties, and I read in the news that you will be announcing your manifesto soon. Since you're on the subject of Norway, I Googled and I realized that actually Norway is a very funny country, because practically they have free education, practically free healthcare, and free pension also. So how do they manage to do that?
Well, for too long, the PAP has indoctrinated Singaporeans with this idea. We cannot have free education, we cannot have free healthcare, alright, we cannot have pension, because otherwise the country will go bankrupt. I'm telling you, that is the biggest falsehood I have ever heard. It is not just Norway. You look at Germany. Germany has free education for everyone, even foreign students. And the university education in Germany takes 6 years, alright? It is not 3 years. I had a lot of German friends when I was at university, when I was doing my masters. When I heard that their university was 6 years, I was stunned. But how does Germany provide free education for its people? Yeah? You are telling me that with $2 trillion or more, maybe 3 trillion, you cannot provide free education up to university level for Singaporeans. You cannot provide free healthcare. We have at least, I think, $120 billion. Correct me if I'm wrong. $120 billion in Medisave. You're saying that you cannot provide free healthcare, and our poor old people still, every time when they go to all these polyclinics and they get a referral, they still have to come out in cash. And I understand that this year, what they have to pay has increased over last year. Alright? It does not make sense to me. So I ask Singaporeans, please open your eyes, wake up, and not be sucked in by this false narrative. Yeah? And what is even more ridiculous? When the government tells you, we got to have all these reserves for future generation. You elect a government to look after yourself, alright? Yeah? You don't elect the government to go and look after future generations. That's none of their business. Yeah, the future generations will look after themselves.
Han Hui, do you know that our reserves are locked up, in other words, they cannot be used?
So what is happening now is that in Singapore we have billions, trillions of dollars that are being locked up inside our reserve, and it's down there whereby Singaporeans actually save all this money. So you put all this money into your public housing, you put all this money into your MediSave, so this money are already there. And by paying our GST, our taxes, everything, every single company, public transport, media company, they are already earning profit. They don't need the excess fund. And when the government continue to collect taxes from Singaporeans, these are all excess money that the government can use to better benefit the lives of Singaporeans. Yet the Singapore government is not doing so. 所以新加坡政府呢，从我们的公共交通啊，从我们的医疗保健，从我们的公积金买建筑屋之类的，已经拿取了很多钱，而且各个方向都是有拿到多余的钱，所以政府根本不需要这些钱的，他也不需要我们的88仙。可是为什么政府还要拿这些钱？是因为他讲他要存起来，给我们的下一代。这些钱需要给到下一代吗？如果这一代都不能生存，你还有什么下一代可言呢？ If the current generation can't even reproduce themselves, then what future generation is there? And not only that, the government actually has the ability, because of all this excess fund, to provide free healthcare and free education for our current generation. Why is the government not doing so? By saying that it is free, it is not really free because we already have put in all this money into our MediSave, and therefore this money can be used to better benefit the lives of Singaporeans instead. Why is the government not doing so? 所以这些钱已经在那里了，已经是可以拿出来用，因为我们已经把钱放进去我们的公积金里面，已经可以帮助到我们周围的新加坡人。为什么新加坡政府还是这么自私，不要帮助新加坡人呢？然后他们自己又住在这样大的祖屋里面，下个月是7月，在国会里面，他们又会有什么样的故事来给新加坡人说，为什么他们两个可以住这么大的祖屋呢？难道是跟他的2个老婆、2个孩子在屋子里面吗？还是他太寂寞，所以要找这样大的地跟那些鬼玩抓迷藏？
Okay, Vivian, if you can just allow me to say something about the alliance, all right? Now, I think this is a very significant move, my fellow Singaporeans. You know, for over a decade now, Singaporeans have been saying the opposition must come together in an alliance. And I think Singaporeans became even more, or what you call the call became even louder and stronger after Singaporeans saw what happened in Malaysia in 2018 with Pakatan Harapan coming to power and kicking out UMNO, which had been in power for 61 years. So we have heeded the calls of Singaporeans. It has been a long journey. You know, in 2018, 7 parties came together, and that was arranged by the SDP to discuss about an alliance. And we even asked Tan Cheng Bock at that time to lead the alliance. Remember, in those days, Tan Cheng Bock did not have a party, okay? Unfortunately, nothing came out of that. It was again all talk. And I think year after year, Singaporeans have gone away very disappointed. Yeah. So the 4 parties, People's Voice, Reform Party, People's Power Party, the Democratic Progressive Party, finally sat down in January this year, and we started serious talks. And we had many meetings. And we finally managed to thrash out everything. We are agreed on the most critical issues. Yes, we have a ready manifesto to go to the country, but we will not be releasing it so quickly. We will release it nearer to the elections. But I can tell you, it is a very exciting and innovative manifesto which will elevate the lives of many Singaporeans. All right? Now is not the time to keep to the old narrative that the country cannot provide free education, free healthcare. And you know what is the result? The result is that year after year, the total fertility rate declines. We are down now to 1.05, my fellow Singaporeans. I never fail to repeat that in every broadcast I do with Hui Hui. To even replace ourselves, you need a TFR of 2.1. You're 50%, all right? That means every year, the number of native indigenous Singaporeans is declining. Yet our population is increasing all the time. Why? Because the PAP just brings in all these immigrants, brings them in, all right? And you know, if you are not careful, there's going to be disaster. Because you bring in the foreigners, you bring in the immigrants, there is not enough integration into our society, all right? You have enclaves forming, all right, in the east and in the central. And you know, what Lee Kuan Yew talked about all those years about nation building, basically you can throw it down the drain, all right? We are not a proper nation anymore by any means. So we have to reverse that. And I hope Singaporeans, you will start believing in the opposition and our proposals on how to better your lives and the lives of your next generation. We do not promise that the lives of other generations beyond your next generation will be better. We are not like the PAP looking that far. But at the same time, the present generation has seen a decline in their prospects and their future. And you know, you ask, you compare. Was it easier if you are in your 50s and your 60s now? Was it easier when you were in your 30s and 40s to buy a BTO than what your children have to face now? Was it easier for you then to buy a car? And you know, you have a government that dares talk about the future of many generations down the road, when at present moment, even the next generation has a bleaker future than what you had.
Wow, Lim Tian, I'm sure many Singaporeans are looking forward to your People's Alliance manifesto. But like they say, in war, you cannot let your enemy know what or how you're going to fight your battle. We look forward to that. Actually, it's not 100% correct to say that the reserves are totally locked up, because under the NIRC, net investment returns contribution, about 20 over billion from the reserves, the return of the reserves is being used by the government in the budget in a year. So, in other words, if you put the numbers into perspective, like Lim Tian say, we estimate we have about 1.9 trillion reserves. We're using 20 over billion a year under NIRC. That means we're using about 1.something% of the return of the reserves that we can spend. I think very different from what other countries are doing, like Norway and all that. Let's move on to an entirely new topic. Lim Tian, presidential election.
Well, the presidential elections are due, the latest by September the 13th, although I was surprised to read in the papers the other day saying that it could be held 1 month later, like into October. I've always known the presidential election period to be between June the 14th to September the 13th, because this 3-month period. But now they say, you know, it's possible to stretch into October. So we will see. Halimah is not running again, all right? So it's very strange that up to now, the PAP have not declared who their favorite candidate is. So we wait. I think it should be soon. And I also wait to see who will be the anointed candidate of the opposition.
Hui Hui, last week the media did a very interesting piece about who can qualify to stand for the presidential election. And having read that, do you know that you can also apply. Okay, let me read to you what the media said about qualifying. Okay, so let's say the person qualified because he was a minister, or he was what you call at the company CEO with 500 million assets or that. Okay, but what surprised me was that even if the candidate qualifies, the basic criteria is up to the
Election
committee to decide whether
He's of
the
good character.
experience and ability is such that is they can stand for president. So even you qualify, you may still not get your certificate of eligibility because you must be deemed, as Vivian said, by the election committee, right, to have the right experience and ability. Also, you must have integrity, good character and reputation, okay? And also, even if you don't qualify, they can make an exception and allow you to qualify, as the media said was what happened in the last presidential, the one where they had the election, not the one where they had a walkover, where one candidate who did not qualify was actually allowed to stand to qualify. So on that basis, maybe you also can apply, right? Because it's up to them whether they want to give it to you or not. In a way, if you read all that, about that, what you basic qualification and what you need to, whether you are good enough, and even you don't qualify, also can, if they want, they can also let you stand. Okay, so maybe.
So in Singapore right now, we are supposed to be having a presidential election. However, the government has said that they can extend the election to October. So why they can suddenly say they want to extend it? Why not have it now? Is it because they can't find a candidate? Is it because the candidate is still deciding are they a Chinese, Malay, Indian? But in this election, actually their race doesn't really matter. Anybody can stand for election, so there shouldn't be a racial issue right now. Instead, the Singapore government is saying that there is a background issue. That means the person who is going to stand for election must qualify from managing a company that is big enough to say that they can next manage a country. But the president's duty actually is to protect our reserve, is to question our CPF. But until today, which president has actually stepped forward to question it? And how many of them questioned it successfully? Where exactly is our CPF money going? 所以新加坡呢，现在是要有一个总统的大选，可是呢，就像上次一样，总统的大选根本没有人参与，然后他们也不知道那个总统到底是有做工还是没有做工，还是只是摆在那边摆美而已。总统的责任就是要照顾我们人民的钱，照顾我们的公积金。可是总统到现在根本没有人去讲说我们公积金钱是怎样存款，为什么一年只拿2.5%？为什么没有增加呢？So the president until today did not question why is our CPF only having a 2.5% interest and why is the interest not increasing. Of course, in the recent days, the government has said that they are going to increase our CPF. But how much are they going to?
But it is so minuscule, right? What is it, 0.1 or 0.01? I can't remember now, but...
And there is a limit and there is a duration as well. It is not permanently. So why is that so? Is it because they are trying to pacify the population for the few months, and then once the presidential election is over, then the percentage will actually go back?
Well, pacify is the right word. Because didn't they do that with the COE? All of a sudden they say they will give out more COEs for a 3-month period until July, right? You see, let me say this, my fellow Singaporeans. I think it is very wrong where you have a system and a so-called election committee can determine, remember something, these are unelected people, right? Unelected. They can say whether a person qualifies or is disqualified because he's not of good moral character. You know, a few months ago, when the hoo-ha about Lee Hsien Yang possibly running for president, alright, and then what happened next? Teo Chee Hean stands up in parliament and says that, oh, he's on the run. Okay? And then, of course, all those establishment so-called experts law professors starting to come out and say that he will not qualify because he's not of good moral character. Hey, why are we leaving the decision to some few people, part of the elite and the establishment, to decide who can run or cannot run for president? If Hui Hui wants to run and the basic criteria is met, although you don't qualify because you're not 45 years old, Hui Hui, alright, but if anyone who's 45 years old wants to run and qualify and satisfies the basic criteria, why should we not let that person run? Whether Singaporeans want to reject him because of his bad character, alright, let the people decide. Yeah?
But this is called uniquely Singapore democracy.
If people can vote for the law minister to be the current law minister, who else has a worse character than him? Even his own wife said that he is the authoritative person.
Well, you cannot forget about your favorite minister, but never mind. There was a very interesting media report 3 days ago that 50% of homeowners in Los Angeles are house poor. What about Singapore?
Oh, Singapore, I think, has an even worse problem. You know, they claim that a lot of Singaporeans are millionaires, or how many thousands are millionaires. That's because of their asset. Alright? But I think if you ask around, people will generally tell you, yeah, I may be asset rich, but I'm cash poor. So I think we have an even more severe problem than in Los Angeles now. And let's not forget, in recent times, the house prices have skyrocketed, right? You know?
Anyway, the definition of house poor is that a person should not use more than 30% of their income on housing costs. And housing costs is mortgage payment, property tax, utilities, insurance, everything to do with the house lah. So it has often been cited to us that, those people who own HDB flat, most of them, like 70%, don't use more than 25% of the income to pay for the HDB flat. So it's affordable lah, right? But if you take this definition of housing costs and house poor, you add in utilities, property tax, SNCC, insurance, maybe you will cross 30%. But of course, the interesting question is, if you say that most people who own a HDB flat is affordable because they don't use more than 25%, statistically, this is what we call a flawed reasoning, because those who can't afford wouldn't have bought it in the first place. And those who buy it, they cannot afford, will give it up. So all the people who own the flat obviously will find it affordable. Yes,
and also, let's not forget this. I think when you cite those statistics, those are worldwide statistics and the worldwide standard, that you should not be using more than 30% of your income towards your household expenses and paying off the mortgage. Let's not forget this, 80% of Singaporeans live in HDB. HDB is supposed to be public housing, alright? We are not even talking about private housing here. So if the worldwide standard is 30% for private housing, and most countries is private housing, it's not public housing, shouldn't the figure in Singapore be even less than that?
Basically, what is happening now is that in other countries, they have this standard, the government peg their prices of houses according to the people's salary. And the people shouldn't use more than 30% of their salary for their mortgage, for their SNCC, all the taxes included inside. But in Singapore, instead of including everything into the calculation, the Singapore government is only using the mortgage, that means the HDB loan, as a form of calculation. The Singapore government did not include our bills, it did not include our SNCC, did not include our other minor charges that we have to pay in order to maintain the house, in order to stay in the house. 所以全世界的政府呢，他们在卖公共主屋、卖土地这些给人民的时候呢，他们都是直接卖给人民，然后他们跟人民讲说，你的工钱多少，他们花的钱是不会超过30%，30%不只是还那个贷款，还有还他的杂费，还他的水电费，所有的拉杂杂的东西全部加进去是不会超过30%。可是新加坡的政府呢，他们只说房贷没有超过30%，没有超过25%，这样子就够了。 你这样子的话，人家还要还其他的水电费、杂费这些加进去。加进去的话，超过30%，就代表在你这个国家还的屋子根本就是很贵，根本就是住不起。
Let me say this also. Sorry to interrupt, Hui Hui. My friends, get rid of this notion that the HDB is the finest public housing project in the world. I'm telling you, it is not. All right? Don't be seduced by this PAP narrative. I want you, after this program, to Google and do some research. Google the public housing projects in Vienna, Austria. Vienna has consistently been ranked the #1 most livable city in the world. You know, their public housing is fantastic. Every public housing project is designed independently. They have contests for architects to design. They have allocated green spaces, at least 50% of green spaces. And you know what? The rental, you will not believe me. You think Europe is very expensive, right? The rental of these flats sometimes is something like 700 euros, slightly more than 1,000 Singapore dollars. You know how much is a 5-room HDB in Ang Mo Kio renting today? Or it was reported a month ago, $6,500. And the PAP is telling you it's very affordable. This is incomparable. You can't find anything similar to what we have in Singapore. Please Google Vienna public housing.
HDB is very affordable because after 99 years it will become zero, and all your CPF and cash utilized will have gone up in smoke. And of course, generally, once your flat is more than 40 years, you may find that the value starts to drop.
And you know, in Vienna, the public housing has become such an attraction because they're so beautifully designed. They have become tourist attractions. Tourists actually go there and marvel at their public housing.
All good things must come to an end. We have come to the end of the 7th live with Lim Tian and Han Hui, and for the first time, we have 4 channels for you to watch: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. But like all things that must come to an end, not so good governments may come to an end too, like what has just happened in Thailand. Some final words from Lim Tian and Han Hui.
My final word, my friends, is I want all of you to realize how courageous Han Hui and 5 other Singaporeans were when they took out this judicial review against the government's vaccination policy, which prevented those who were unvaccinated from going to their workplace to work, all right, and having to foot any medical costs themselves if they fell ill. My friends, I ask you to be generous, because what have we learned after 2021 when all the hoo-ha about the vaccine was going on? We have realized, right, how many litigation cases are there throughout the world now about the vaccines? What have we found out about the lies of the pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer? And I've told you many times in this video series that the problem is not going to abate. In the coming months and years, you are going to see more and more litigation. All right? So I ask you to be generous. Han Hui was a trailblazer in leading 5 others in this litigation. She needs your help now to raise this money to pay off the AGC. The AGC has lawyers in it, every one of whom are paid by the taxpayers of Singapore. And yet, they want to impose this cost on litigants like Han Hui. I ask you to open your wallets and help her. Thank you.
Han Hui, 我知道为什么你老了。Your final words.
So this is our 7th live video. We have managed to raise 8,000 out of 23,000, and we are short of 15,000 more. In the next video, we will definitely have one on our 8th live video. You can leave your comments down below what do you want to see on our 8th live video, and probably by then we can talk more about the big house, because that big house, the big houses in Singapore will be in the news. And what other things you want to say, just leave your comments down below. Remember to share this video, like and follow. We will see you on the 8th live video.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.